Alrighty, thank you everyone for joining this press call today. Just letting in a couple more reporters in the waiting room, and we'll go ahead and kick things off in a second. We have Senator Patty Murray from Washington State, Premier David Eby from British Columbia, Dr. Edmund Schweitzer, founder of Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories in Pullman, and Dan Tucker, the executive director of Whatcom Working Waterfront Coalition in Washington State. After all of the speakers have delivered their remarks, there will be time for questions from press in attendance, and we'll ask folks to use the raise hand function when they have a question, and I will call on reporters and they can ask their questions that way. So please save any questions for the end. With that, we are recording, and I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Senator Murray to kick us off.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. You know, for a so-called businessman, President Trump doesn't seem to know the first thing about running a business. And then again, maybe that explains his 6 bankruptcies. But besides that, every time he opens his mouth, he is demonstrating that he doesn't understand how tariffs work. And he doesn't care if his absurd tax hikes are hurting our economy and our small businesses. The reality is plain as day, especially in places like Washington State, where we are on the front line of a trade war with our neighbors that nobody asked for. Canada isn't just a trading partner for us, it is our ally, and they are our neighbor. We have friends and families that span the northern border. We have supply lines and businesses that depend on the open flow of trade, tourism, and goodwill between our countries. Canada is one of our largest trading partners, accounting for every year nearly $8 billion in exports, including our seafood, apples, and airplane parts, and more than $2 billion in cross-border tourism and business. Not to mention, we actually import nearly $18 billion in goods from Canada each year. So for us, having Trump throw a tantrum with these tariffs is really throwing a wrench into our businesses that have operated for decades and throwing communities on both sides of the border into chaos and really throwing our neighborly way of life into jeopardy. How are farmers supposed to stay afloat when Trump just jacked up the cost of supplies they need? At the same time, he is driving some of their best customers away. How are businesses and factories supposed to keep their lights on when their supply chains are being disrupted and their inputs like energy and steel and aluminum keep getting more expensive? How are hotels and towns that are fueled by tourism supposed to keep their doors open when cancellations are going up, bookings are going down, and 75% of Canadian travelers who were going to visit the US are deciding they'd now rather go somewhere the president doesn't constantly attack? So let's be clear, these are not hypothetical questions. They are the cold, hard realities Trump is forcing onto our communities. It doesn't take much imagination to see how hard Trump's trade war is making life for people, especially for our border communities. All you have to do is listen. Talk to ferry operators who are feeling the squeeze of reduced travel. Talk to community leaders in Bellingham and Whatcom County, where 12% of taxable retail sales came from Canadians. Talk to business owners in Point Roberts, which is just completely depends on Canadian trade and tourism. I have been telling this over and over to my colleagues and anyone who will listen. If you want to understand the real cost of what is happening, come to Washington State. Talk to people on the front lines of this pointless, painful trade war. And that's exactly why we're having this call today, to put a spotlight on what we are seeing on both sides of the border, to make more of these voices heard, to raise the alarm, and maybe even offer a little economics lesson to Trump, since he appears to need it. When you raise the cost for small businesses, which is exactly what these tariffs do, when you drive away loyal customers and trading partners, which is exactly what happens when you toss up barriers and toss out insults, you make life harder and you raise costs for everyday Americans. It is very clear that President Trump wants to treat tariffs like some reality TV show, constantly playing up the outrage and the uncertainty of the will he, won't he drama that he seems to like living in. But the questions that I am hearing when I talk to folks home in Washington State are more like, why on earth would he do this? And what the heck is he thinking? And how am I going to be able to afford this? Because here's what Trump needs to understand. This is not reality TV. This is actual reality. These aren't people playing businessmen. They're trying to run actual businesses that employ actual Americans. Unlike him, they don't thrive on outrage, and they do not want any drama. They need certainty. They need common sense, and they need policies that bring in customers, not drive them away, and bring prices down, not drive them up. So I want you all to know I'm going to keep fighting here in Congress to put an end to these pointless tariffs that are making life harder for people on both sides of our border. And I will keep pushing for legislation to reassert Congress's power over tariff policy. It is beyond clear we cannot entrust this responsibility to a president who is toggling economic policies on and off like a kid with a joystick. We have got to keep talking about this, which is why we're having this call today, until more of my Republican colleagues get the message. And I thank everybody who's participating in this today to talk about what you are seeing. So I'm joined on this call by British Columbia Premier David Eby. He will be speaking next, and as I've told him in the past, I appreciate our relationship and thank you for working with us on this. It is a joy to have you on this call. Premier Eby.
Thank you so much, Senator Murray, and thank you very much to Dr. Schweitzer and Mr. Tucker for joining us on this call as well. We in British Columbia know how important our relationship is with everyday Americans. You're our friends, you're our family, you're our colleagues often at work. We've benefited from a relationship that is the envy of the world, 150 years of peaceful coexistence with the longest undefended border in the world. An economic relationship that has benefited and grown both of our countries, helped keep costs down for everyday families and allowed businesses to grow. The trade war that we're in right now that neither Washington State nor British Columbia nor Alaska asked for, but is being imposed on us by the president, is a recipe for mutually assured destruction. The last time this happened was in the 1930s. And it led to a global economic downturn that devastated the world economy for almost a generation. We don't need to live that experience again. The cuts this time are hurting small businesses. They're hurting families on both sides of the border. Inflation is up in the United States. Economic growth is down. That trend is going to continue. And we're feeling it here in Canada too. Just like British Columbia is Washington State's #2 customer for exports, you're our destination for exports as well. We trade back and forth, we exchange goods and services, and we both benefit from specialties that we have. And it's that mutual benefit that's at risk. The impacts for British Columbians and the threats from the president are so serious that British Columbians are making the hard but necessary decision to boycott U.S. goods, to not drink U.S. alcohol or purchase it, to not visit the United States. Cross-border visits from BC to Washington State are down 35%. And that's bad news for Washington businesses, and British Columbians know that, and we don't want it to be that way. We know that we all benefit when we're visiting each other's countries, when we're benefiting from each other's experiences and businesses, and we're growing our economies together. There's no doubt that the longer this trade war continues, the more damage it's going to do. And today's press conference really illustrates that there's a willingness on both sides. I've heard similar comments about the need to revisit these tariff policies from the Republican senator in Alaska, from other senators from both parties across the country, but certainly from everyday Americans who are wondering why, when our countries work so well together, when we have so many shared values, why this is happening. If there's an opportunity, we have to seize it. People are counting on us. We can work together to unlock our potential between our two countries, to keep costs low for people, to grow the economy and keep people employed, and to employ even more people on both sides of the border. It's the way it's always worked, and it's the way it can continue to work again. I believe very strongly that we're stronger together. And I hope that in good faith, we can reach across the border and find a pathway back to where we were and ensure that strength between our two countries. Until then, Canada is going to do our work to stand on our own 2 feet, to ensure our sovereignty is respected, to diversify our markets. And my hope is sincerely when the administration, when the government comes back to the table with Canada, you'll find a stronger partner and a better partner, and one that is welcoming of a renewed relationship. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Premier Eby, and thank you, Senator Murray. In March, following President Trump's initiation of tariffs, I sent an open letter to our customers and suppliers reassuring them that SCL is committed to free trade. In 1994, our 3 countries signed the North American Free Trade Agreement. We have been mutually benefiting from its major enhancements to our economic and political freedoms. The visions of Kennedy and Reagan came true. Friends, neighbors, allies, partners. Free exchange benefits most everything we need, including food, automobiles, aircraft, pharmaceuticals, clothing, electronics, appliances, industrial equipment, housing, education, and energy. Regarding energy, our 3 countries are united by transmission lines and pipelines, sharing resources to get the most benefit for the citizens of Mexico, Canada, and the United States. High voltage lines move energy freely between BC Hydro, the west coast of the United States, and Comisión Federal de Electricidad in Mexico. These exchanges drive down the prices of energy, making better use of capital, increasing the quality and dependability of supply, and improving the environment. Excess solar power generated during the daytime moves from sunny areas to colder, cloudier areas at the speed of light. At night, cheap and clean hydropower generated in Canada and the U.S. Northwest moves south, also at the speed of light. Pipelines from Canada and Mexico carry crude oil to the U.S. refineries, and then finished petroleum products are shared within NAFTA and shipped elsewhere for the benefit of us all. We're united by free trade, with much more in common than in difference. Our differences in culture, language, climate, and history are to be celebrated and appreciated. They're our roots. The president is critical of our relationships and seems to be missing the joy in our sovereign roots and our mutual successes enhanced by free trade. We should be celebrating our 35 years of NAFTA and 5 years of the USMCA. After all, free trade works. It floats all boats. Adam Smith wrote in The Wealth of Nations in 1776, "It is always and must be the interest of the great body of people to buy whatever they want of those who sell it cheapest." This proposition could never have been called in question had not the interested sophistry of merchants and manufacturers confounded the common sense of mankind. Even the threats of disrupting free trade are unsettling. Damaging NAFTA and USMCA is counter to Kennedy, to Reagan, to the roots of the U.S., and to the broad and common interests of all of us in Mexico, Canada, the United States. Our trade agreements are beacons to the rest of the world. SCL is committed to economic and political freedom, and that includes free trade. No matter what, we will be there for our customers in our 3 countries and around the world. We will be there with our suppliers at home and around the world. We treasure the friendships, partnerships, collaborations, authorships, common inventions, and other relationships we've built over the years. Senator Murray, thank you for this opportunity and for your leadership embracing free trade. Now we'll hear from Dan Tucker.
Thank you, Mr. Schweitzer. Good morning, Senator Murray, Eby, members of the press. My name is Dan Tucker, Executive Director of the Whatcom Working Waterfront Coalition. We're based in Bellingham, Washington. We're a nonpartisan representative of maritime industries here in the region, and this issue of cross-border trade and policy is indeed nonpartisan. And we have several industries that are feeling the impacts of uncertainty and added costs. We've been hearing from our membership across all sectors. I'll highlight a few here, and some of them are joining us on the call today for questions and answers afterwards. Several maritime companies here in the region are facing major cost increases due to tariffs and cross-border trade restrictions, particularly between the US and Canada. Corvus Energy, for example, operates on both sides of the border, and they suffer a nearly 50% tariff when sending US assembled battery systems to Canada for testing. Due to the Chinese components in them, they are disqualified from USMCA protections. Steel and aluminum tariffs add an additional 25% on top of that. Plant manager in Bellingham, Kirk Dessler's on the call with us today. He can answer some questions on those. Similarly, we have Drayton Harbor Oyster Company in Blaine, right on our border, and other oyster farming operations in the region who rely on Canadian markets for oyster farming equipment sourced from New Zealand through Canadian suppliers. There are no U.S. alternatives. These tariffs translate directly to higher costs for them. The blanket tariffs also threaten independent fishermen and tribal fishermen who rely on Canadian bait, deck gear, and supplies throughout their seasons. Drayton Harbor Oyster has seen almost $100,000 drop in revenue over their last year due to the increase in equipment costs, but also due to the lower cross-border tourism. I highly recommend visiting their restaurant, and owner Steve Seymour has offered his contact information. If anyone would like to follow up, please email me later if you'd like it. The unpredictability of tariffs, even the threat of them, is causing volatility in market pricing. All American marine and aluminum boat manufacturer here in the region has seen copper pricing spike solely due to tariff speculation. Just the threat of tariffs has destabilized their supply pricing, making it difficult to budget and making it impossible for them to forecast shipping costs and other planning. Musted Autoline, who makes longline fishing equipment, also notes the same thing. Unstable tariff landscape makes it impossible to forecast. They can't give customers accurate estimates. Uncertainty is one of the most common and disruptive themes. Seafood Producers Co-op, operating for 75 years here as a fisherman's cooperative. We have Kendall Whitney, sales manager, on the call with us today who can answer more questions about them, was forced into panic buying packaging materials ahead of the tariffs with no U.S. alternatives, tying up capital and incurring unnecessary storage and interest costs. They also report canceled or altered orders from major markets like China and the EU, making long-term planning unreliable. CEO Matt Harden of Northwest Diesel Power, an engine supplier and marine service company who's on the call today, also echoes this challenge. Inflation, uncertainty, and supply chain delays have stifled investment and consumer confidence. They estimate what could be up to a 70% drop in new boat sales depending on how these tariffs evolve, and stress that U.S. production isn't a viable alternative. It could take up to a decade or more to have U.S. companies invest and build to the point of supplying the volume and being competitive enough to meet the industry needs. The Seafood Producers Co-op has also highlighted that we hold long-standing U.S.-Canada agreements on albacore tuna, which allow Canadian processors to buy U.S. fish. Fish do not know borders, and in shared waters, treaties like this and others, like the Pacific Salmon Treaty being negotiated right now, require goodwill and good relations between nations and industry partners. It is vital that we keep those relations to sustain both nations' fisheries and maritime economies. Across the board, companies warn that U.S. seafood and maritime products are becoming less competitive internationally. Tariff-driven price increases ripple through the supply chain, reducing ex-vessel value for fishermen and hurting GDP contributions across all sectors. We've heard anecdotes that some companies have even had to pull U.S.-made labels off their products overseas for negative reception. In short, maritime businesses, from advanced energy and vessel manufacturing to fishing and aquaculture, are being squeezed by a combination of tariffs, inflation, and uncertainty. Without policy stability and trade agreements that reflect the integrated nature of this industry, both domestic growth and global competitiveness are at serious risk. It is vital when we live in such close proximity that we have good relations with our neighbors, that we have good trade policies with them, and that we help bolster both of our nation's industries together. Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. Now we have some time for questions from members of the press who are in attendance. If you would like to ask a question, please use the raise hand function. And when I call on you, please say your name and outlet. And we'll go first to Robert.
Oh, hi, thank you for taking my question. It's Rob Buffum with CTV News Vancouver. My first question, if I'm allowed to, I'm hoping to ask my first one to Premier Eby. It's kind of a two-parter. A colleague wants to know, apologies that this is off topic, but last week the UK announced plans to drop the voting age to 16. They want to know whether that's something you'd look at doing here. And on a separate one for the Premier, I just wanted to get your thoughts on this week you'd responded to the U.S. ambassador's comments that the Trump administration finds Canadians mean and nasty because of the boycott of alcohol and travel. And you said, look, this is getting Trump's attention. Let's double down on that. Let's continue to do that. How do you reconcile that? I mean, we're speaking to American politicians and businesses that are hurt by that ban, and you're extending an olive branch saying we're friends. Yet at the same time, there is a sentiment that British Columbians need to keep doing what we're doing and boycotting.
Thanks, Rob. Good question. On the issue of 16-year-olds voting, we're not currently looking at it. Our government changed the rules to allow 16-year-olds to register to vote, getting rid of a barrier for young people who weren't sure if they were on the voting list, and giving teachers an opportunity to educate their classes about the importance of voting, how voting works, and we continue to support high school and grade school votes during election periods. We are not currently looking at changing the voting age. We'll watch, obviously, what happens in the UK carefully. It's an interesting experiment that they're doing, but it's not one that we're looking at in BC. As for the second question, it is hard. I mean, I'm looking Senator Murray in the face, hear Dan's stories about the impacts on their businesses. This is not what anybody wants. And I can tell you stories about the softwood lumber families who are dependent on that industry being successful, who are wondering what new duties and in particular the so-called national security investigation into our softwood lumber in order to put additional tariffs on will mean for them and for their communities. This is miserable on both sides of the border. And the hard part is that we know our friends are right there in Washington State. We've worked together for many years, and we hope to work together again. But that is the nature of a war, and a trade war in particular, and that's what the president has brought to us. And we're joining hands across the border saying, let's take a step back. Let's work together and find a path of mutual prosperity again. And the more Americans of good faith that join us in that call, Canadians are there. We're ready to work together.
I wonder if I could ask this by way of follow-up for Senator Murray, what your thoughts are on the idea of British Columbians and Canadians continue to boycott. You've talked about the capricious nature of Donald Trump's decisions and how he negotiates. Obviously, this seems to be catching his attention, despite the pain it's causing folks in Washington State. Can you understand why we're doing it?
No one wants this. I think the Premier said it. We did not ask for this. It's been imposed on us. And I think the Premier is making it clear he has to make it painful for the United States. That doesn't change our relationship with British Columbia. We've always been friends, allies. We've had challenges in the past, but we talk to each other. We work through it. And that's what we both want at the end of this.
Thanks. Now we'll go to a question from Sophia with Cascadia Daily News in Bellingham.
Hi, this is a question for Senator Murray. So you'd mentioned Point Roberts earlier. Our paper has done some reporting on the difficulties businesses are facing there, and also at other border towns in Whatcom County. I'm curious what your thoughts are on what can actually be done on a state level to help folks in those areas, particularly in Point Roberts, because they are so dependent on Canadian tourism. I mean, if Canadians aren't coming, that is their choice to do so. What can Washington State actually do to, help their situation?
Well, the state of Washington is doing everything they can to help, especially Point Roberts, a very isolated community, very dependent on Canada for many reasons, including transportation for their kids back into the United States to go to school. So it's a real challenge. Who is responsible for this, and we all need to remember this, is the President of the United States who started this. We are raising our voices to say enough is enough, stop this. What we can do in Congress is get Republicans to join us to take back the power to set tariffs in Congress, not in the White House. That's what I want to see happen.
And now we'll go to Mark Page, if you can say your name and outlet.
Yes, I'm with Black Press Media in Victoria. This question is for Premier Eby. I'd like to get some more clarity. This morning, you were asked about counter tariffs and and your thoughts on whether you support more retaliatory measures. It sounded like you were open to some retaliatory measures that do not negatively impact British Columbians. So, I just want to get some more clarity on that. What types of retaliatory measures would you support if more tariffs are implemented on August 1st? Would you support, federal counter tariffs, or will you be planning any more retaliatory measures from the province?
If the president follows through on his threats on August 1st, it won't just be against British Columbia, it'll be against Canada, but also the rest of the world as well. It's a very strange thing that the president is picking a fight with the entire world, but that appears to be the case. We will be working closely with the federal government, with our colleagues across Canada. And the federal government, the Prime Minister in particular, is reaching out, as one would expect, to other countries to discuss and ensure coordination, which I'm very grateful for. Because the goal here, in my opinion, is to maximize pressure in areas where the decision makers are who are driving this agenda. I talked to Senator Murray, and she's speaking out so forcefully against these tariffs and the impact on her state. I see Senator Murkowski from Alaska raising concern about the relationship between Alaska and Canada and how important that is. What we're looking for, in my opinion, we should be looking for, is opportunities to place maximum pressure on those decision makers who are advocating for these tariffs, who support them, who support the harm on Americans, the harm on Canadians that they bring, that disrespect the long-standing benefits to both countries of the relationship that we have. British Columbia is all in to provide support in that coordinated way. We have tools at our disposal that we're prepared to bring to the table as part of the discussion. But we are fully supportive of a coordinated Team Canada approach. The piece that I really underlined for the Prime Minister and for the other premiers in our discussion was that because of our unique geography, being on the coast, we do face additional challenges with tariff policy that other provinces don't. About 20% of the impact of the retaliatory tariffs that have been placed so far by the federal government, 20% of that impact falls on British Columbia. We are one of 10 provinces. And so a disproportionate share is being borne by British Columbians. The additional steel and aluminum counter tariffs have an impact on us that's different than other provinces. And we need the federal government to recognize that and support us in supporting the entire country's effort.
Now we will go to a question from Eliza Billingham with Spokane Public Radio in the chat. She's having some issues with her audio. And she wants to ask, Dr. Schweitzer, if you could expand more on what impacts this trade war is having on your business and in Eastern Washington.
Well, thank you very much. President Trump seems to have created the 51st state that he was talking about, which is the great state of uncertainty. And this is affecting all of us. And we predict that in 2025 alone, that tariffs will cost SEL $100 million in unanticipated federal taxes. These $100 million divided by our 7,000 owners is a hit of $14,000 per employee around the world. And I agree so much with Senator Murray that the best thing we can do is to support the efforts by Democrats and Republicans in both the House and the Senate to restore congressional control over tariffs and block this president and future ones from abusing executive orders, especially here in the case of free trade.
And now we'll go to Thomas Seal with Bloomberg News in Canada. And you may need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, great. I just wanted to ask about the Columbia River Treaty, given that it concerns both these regions. It was paused as the new US administration came in. Now, that's not so unusual with a change in president, but on the other hand, President Trump has spoken about Canadian water, the faucet of water he talks about. So I wanted to know if there's been any progress on that file and if there's been any extra detail on why it's being paused and any concerns the US might have.
Well, at this point, we don't have any new news on that. I think we were all just aghast that this president would pause the discussion on that. We had made tremendous progress. We were working towards the final parts of the solution. I am encouraging the administration to start where we left off and keep going, and I think we can be successful. We have not had a response from him yet.
Thank you. My follow-up, if I may, is just on Point Roberts again. I visited and reported on this, and it's more for Premier Eby. There is a carve-out for Campobello Island on the other side of Canada on counter tariffs. I wondered if you'd asked the federal government for any kind of carve-out for Point Roberts, given their unique geographical challenges.
No, we haven't.
Any plans to do so, or just
no, we don't have any plans to do so.
Okay.
And now we'll go to Bob, if you can unmute yourself and say your name and outlet.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yes, Bob Mackin, the Breaker.News in Vancouver. For Premier Eby, you've encouraged British Columbians to boycott travel to the United States. You've ordered the government to avoid procuring goods and services from the United States, yet you're keeping BC involved in the FIFA World Cup 26 and not exercising the force majeure clause in the contract. Now, 3/4 of the matches are in the U.S. It involves American sponsors such as Home Depot, Bank of America, McDonald's, and Coca-Cola, which all must be protected here in BC under the contract. And Donald Trump is a very enthusiastic supporter of FIFA and a close friend of Gianni Infantino, the president. So why keep BC involved in Donald Trump's party?
Well, I think World Cup enthusiasts around the world would be shocked to hear the World Cup described as Donald Trump's party. This is a celebration of soccer fans around the world of world-class soccer. We're thrilled to have games in British Columbia for soccer fans, and I know that my colleague Doug Ford in Ontario is excited about having games in Ontario. This is a great example of what I'm talking about in terms of minimizing impact on British Columbians and Canadians of our retaliation, and trying our best to get through this tariff war while sending a message. World Cup is going to bring about $1 billion in benefits to British Columbia. And we're excited about that. We're excited about world-class soccer coming here. And actually, one of the offers we've made is, given the actions of the president around deportations, arrests, extrajudicial deportations, and other concerns that people may have about crossing the border to the United States, we've offered to host additional games on short notice if a team is concerned about crossing the border into the U.S. and feels more comfortable coming to Canada.
Yeah, I've got a follow-up. Now, Vancouver has a hotel shortage. You don't have support yet from the federal government for all the federal services, including security and safety. And downtown Vancouver businesses now near BC Place, where there are going to be severe closures, are worried about being able to stay open because of those transportation and security barriers that might affect them economically. As well, the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition says it has been unable to get any meetings with provincial or Vancouver officials about FIFA and the impacts on the homeless and the poor that need to access services and go about their daily lives in Vancouver next year. They're also worried about civil liberties, which you used to be worried about. What do you say to the small businesses that are near BC Place that will be affected, that might be on the wrong side of a security fence and can't access their customers, their suppliers, that their staff can't access? And what do you say to the people, the people that advocate for the homeless and the poor in downtown Vancouver, whose lives will also be affected by this very large event, which is going to have very severe impacts from a transportation and security standpoint next year?
Well, BC has a proud history of hosting large events. This one is quite different from the Olympics, Bob. As you know, this is contained at a single venue. and we'll be working closely as a government with the businesses that are inside any security perimeters. What businesses in downtown Vancouver are going to see is a massive influx of visitors, of guests, of business. They are going to be overwhelmed with positive economic activity, which they definitely need in the environment that we're talking about and the challenges that our economy has faced as a result of the president's unilateral actions. This is positive economic news for the downtown BIA and for British Columbians, but we need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that allows those businesses to be as successful as possible, which is why we'll work closely with them to ensure that happens. In terms of people who are struggling in our province, and we continue to work to ensure that we're building the housing that people need, but also that there's a positive legacy coming out of the World Cup for lower income communities. Building sports fields across the province, ensuring that kids have the chance to participate in sports. And have that opportunity to celebrate the World Cup regardless of their economic circumstances. One of the great things about soccer is that regardless of a country's economic status, of the wealth that they have, it's a sport that kids can play for relatively low cost, and we'll do our part to bring soccer throughout the province as part of our celebration here in BC.
All right, we have time for just a couple more questions. We're going to go to Austin Reed with Cap KVU in Washington State.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. So, our viewing area serves South Central and Eastern Washington, which is predominantly conservative. I want to know, maybe from Senator Murray, what do you say to those conservatives here in our area that are on President Trump's team, quote unquote, or they're supporting this? What kind of message would you want to kind of say specifically to them?
I think it's really important for everybody to understand that these tariff wars that the president has put us into, especially with Canada and a friend, an ally, and a partner, is costing them. Their prices go up. Their access to products gets harder. Their jobs could be impacted. And this is going to cost us all. We need to make sure that the tariffs are controlled by Congress because we represent our states. We know our states. We know the businesses in our states, like Ed Schweitzer was talking about. And we'll fight to make sure we are not impacted negatively by tariff policies with our friends, our neighbors, and our allies. But what the president doesn't know is that this is impacting tourism in our state. It is impacting people who import who are paying more. It is impacting all of us who go to the store and buy products because they cost us more. And it is a wrong economic policy for us to be pursuing.
All right, now we will go to Mark Page. You can unmute yourself and say your name and outlet.
Sure, yeah. Mark with Black Press again. I just want to follow up. Rob Buffum earlier asked, Senator Murray, what you thought about some of BC's responses to Trump's tariffs. But what do you think, Senator Murray, about our premier calling for Canadians specifically not to travel to the United States? Do you think he's justified in that?
Well, it hurts my heart because these are people that we welcome to our state, to our stores, to our economy, to see our parks, to share cultural experiences. And actually, we have a lot of friends and relatives who live cross-border. But I understand where he's coming from because he's trying to fight back and he has very few tools to do it. So my plea is not to the premier, it is to the president of the United States to recognize this harm that we are going through with this and to back off of this policy so that we can continue the economic, personal, family connections that are so important to all of us.
Great, and it looks like we have time for one more. We'll go to Chuck.
Thank you very much. This question is for Premier Eby, unrelated to the trade issue, but I was wondering if Premier, you have heard any timeline regarding the rescue efforts in the Red Chris mine that happened yesterday. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have any updates at this time, Chuck. We'll be updating media as soon as we can have additional information from the company.
Thank you.
All right, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to participate in this press call this afternoon. Again, this call will be recorded and distributed widely, and I'm going to turn things back to Senator Murray to close us out.
I just want to thank Premier Eby and our other participants today, for Dan and Ed, for talking about the impacts of this tariff war that we are in, and to once again say we can solve this by having the president back off and allow us to move forward in a way that works for our economy. And if that doesn't happen, we need Congress to step in, Republicans and Democrats, to pass legislation to take control back of the tariff situation.